talk to Pearl Flax. Pearl is a trauma-informed couples counselor and a healer with a mission to help couples create a harmonious connection and loving relationship. She does this through a variety of different offerings. I will share a link to her website on the bottom. Thank you so much for doing this again. And I was about to tell you before I hit the record button that I was talking yesterday to someone that podcasts, and he's like, "Oh, this episode you did, I did." He did an episode with my friend. He's like, "Oh, this episode I did, the sound didn't work. I'm probably gonna have to scratch that episode if I can't revive or make the sound good," which is what happened to our first episode. That when I recorded, it was pretty good, but for some reason, the recording of the episode it didn't come in clear, so we had to scratch a full hour and a half, almost an hour and a half conversation. And I was thinking, it's this thing that people don't do. They don't talk about how many things go wrong and how many things don't work, and how many episodes were scratched. Like, you see stuff on social media and it all looks like, okay, yeah, all you need is the talent. All I need is the talent. All I need is the guest. All I need is the software. And the rest is a given. And it turns out that it isn't. There's episodes that go to waste. There are ventures that go down the drain. I think we're going to bring this into the conversation of relationships and marriage. What do people not know that it takes in your practice, in your work of working with couples and helping them come to a place of clarity? Like, what's the assumption and what's the truth?
So good morning. Thank you so much, Mati, for having me here again. Like you say, we never talk about what doesn't work in a world where we live in social media, where all you see is only what works or what seemingly looks perfect on the outside. Personally, I find it very triggering and unhealthy to live in that kind of environment, because it is really from the things that don't work that we learn the most and we grow the most. So it's interesting because I learned a couple of things in this process. I'm really not tech savvy at all, and you kind of initiated me to look into tech savviness. Like, is there a way for you to connect to an AirPod or a headpiece? And I had to learn some things. And I think even reflecting on the conversation that we had last time, I think we both had so much more to sit with, and I think that was a beautiful learning experience for the conversation that we had. So I'll start off with that.
What do you mean we had more to sit with? What does that mean?
Meaning that the conversation that we had, we both looked at different parts of it, right? How we experienced it or what we took out of it. And now we're coming back into a new conversation.
Oh yeah, I checked in with you that, like, for me it's I was saying that it's easy for me to tell you, let's do a conversation with no pressure, and I can scratch it if you don't like it. But if I messed up, can I give myself the same freedom and tell you, I don't like how it sounded, I want to scratch it? And that was a very deep reflection. Thanks for reminding me. I completely forgot of it. I completely forgot that happened. It's like, for me to not publish a not clear episode, it takes to, like, can I give myself that very same thing that's so easy for me to give to a guest? Like, sure, I'm not going to force you to post it if you don't like it. So I'm not going to force an episode out. Like, it's fine. But if I don't want to put it out, can I give myself that same, which is probably also a really good metaphor about any two people doing anything. Like, can I give myself the same, I guess, space that I would give to another, and vice versa? Can I give another the space that I would give to myself? Yeah, that was a really cool. Thanks for reminding me.
My pleasure. That's what I'm here for.
I know, because you accepted it. You're like, sure, of course, no big deal. You were so easy about it. I forgot it was so hard for me to just say, I don't want to post it. And on that note, there was 2 other times that I recorded, and I had to scratch the entire thing. Once I simply forgot. I used to record not digitally, like analog, like wires in my office. It was a whole wired up, and I simply forgot to plug in the microphone to the recording device. I had it set up. I heard the sounds in my earphones, so I knew it was working. But one wire forgot to plug in.
Painful.
And we did a 2.5-hour podcast at the time, and my feeling of shame, of like, I screwed up. And the other time, my mixer, which is again a good brand, it wasn't a cheap $100 mixer. It was a really good mixer. It burned. It's literally burned. Brand new, also a brand new mixer burned. Also halfway in, and it's like how do we deal with hiccups? How do we deal with things that don't work? How do we deal with difficulty? And I think in relationships, a lot of people are like they either give up or they leave. Like it's like before they're willing to commit to working and to doing it again and to asking for what they need. I think there's this big fog or this like belief that it can be solved, or if I say it's not going to work, or so like if you apply this to relationships or to couples that are not in a place of joy together, like what do they do? Like, okay, so something went wrong or something is wrong, and it's been many years like that like the relationship just isn't strong and isn't doesn't feel like love is even a thing that you know that can fit or that's possible. It seems like it's a Hollywood thing. It's a goisha Hollywood thing. So what do they do? How's it work? Give
Well,
us the rundown.
it's interesting how the conversation is evolving so differently than last time. And you brought up this shame piece, and shame is a really dark shadow that we all have parts of it in ourselves, right? And it is only when you said to yourself, can I give myself that grace and that compassion? You know, it's okay if I don't publish this episode, it's okay that I messed up. But really learning how to meet that and be compassionate towards yourself, that that can heal. And I see that in a relationship when we have a lot of conflict and a lot of friction, the judgment, the contempt towards your partner is certainly a transmission of your own shame. You're
Mm,
transmuting the shame that you feel towards yourself, but you're either unaware of it, you're not really sitting with the feeling, you're just really frustrated, and so you're touching with frustration, and that energy has to go somewhere. But
mm,
underneath that frustration could oftentimes be that shame, like, can I be kind to myself in that space? Can I really hold it with compassion? And
mm.
most of us really struggle with it. It's really much easier to tell somebody else than really embody it and work through that. And in marriage, we trigger that part very often, where we're unable to hold our own shame and we project it with a lot of anger and frustration onto the other person.
So if I have a feeling of shame about
Yeah,
something, I didn't do well, or I messed up, or old stuff, or not even related, like
yeah,
something in me is shameful, and I'm not aware of it. I don't necessarily have the words or the process or the support or the clarity around it. So then it's easy to get upset with my partner, not necessarily about this thing, just general. I can just generally, and it because it deflects the.
correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, correct. The first thing is, how aware are we, right? So when we're unaware that really underneath that there is the shame towards with self and towards self, right? Then it's easily projected. And sometimes it can come out into the context of what's happening, and sometimes it's just an outburst into something completely unrelated, but at the core of it is this feeling of shame. And we do this with our children as well. We do. Unfortunately, sometimes, kids get the raw end of the deal because the parent is disconnected from that awareness within themselves. And so they'll, blame the child, or they'll make the child feel bad when there's really something that they feel bad within themselves, but they haven't been able to learn how to hold it with compassion and understanding for self. So it's interesting how this conversation just went into, um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, it
know,
makes a lot of sense. It's like nothing. We're not talking about the partner. We're not talking about the child. We're talking about that inner piece that if that's not addressed or spoken of or given space and clarity, I'm going to deflect into these other areas of my life with frustration, directly or indirectly, either for something valid that has to do with this shame, or unrelated. It's just a deflection.
this is where knowing that we predominantly live very unconsciously, right? Most of society is really unconscious about their behaviors and why they act the way they act or why they do what they do. And that's why healing is such an important part of life. I can't understand why anyone wouldn't want to embark on healing. There's no stigma attached to it of like there's something wrong with you in order to have to heal. There is everything right with you. And let's see if you want to become a more conscious human, right?
Hmm.
And live
I
from a
love
place of
that.
consciousness. Yeah.
That's a really good way of looking at it because there's a few things to it. Let's put it as a question. So there's a few. I'll take I guess the opposite argument. One thing that I've noticed is that for a lot of people, it's a even part of my journey that it's a never ending loop. and some people don't want to enter it because they think they're never going to come out of it. Like they watch others, or they think that, yeah, or without watching others, just feel like that's weaker, this is stronger. How is weak a good thing? And they don't want to enter this merry-go-round of ups and downs, this regulation. They want to just function the best they can, and they'll settle. Settling is a word that I hear a lot, specifically in marriage. It's like they'll settle for what it is, and they don't want to enter this thing you're describing of healing, self-awareness, and bettering, because they don't want to enter this place of uncertainty and doubt and negativity. There's a lot of negativity, specifically in the beginning. I don't like calling it that, but if I'm real with my own self, like, there's a lot of negativity in this whole self-aware thing. Yeah, after many years, it's transmuted and it's in a place of embrace, and it's not negative. It's like, the light and the dark are both light, both is a sham, both is for the good, and it takes time to see that. But for me, I could understand where someone is like, the hell with all this. These people that do healing, it's like they don't want to enter the merry-go-round,
I want to really destigmatize or de detach this attachment to therapy or healing as something negative. One of my kids, he really had a lot of resistance to, like you say, like doing the work. There's nothing wrong with me. There's got to be something wrong with me if I need to go to therapy, if I
Right,
need to do inner work, right? And so I remember last year he had a bunch of friends over for Shabbos, and they were having like a real fun time at the Shabbos table and schmoozing. And one of his friends just like openly talked about therapy. He's in therapy. And so you see the reactions on, the guys' faces, like, okay, that's really much vulnerability. And I'm like, well, why are you talking about your therapist, And so the next guy checks in and he's like, and I go to therapy too. And before you knew it, it like started becoming like deflated, the stigma attached to it. And they were all
right.
talking about it openly. It was such a beautiful conversation. And I think this concept of the association to like healing is bad. I mean, you have to believe in it. Obviously, I do believe in it that, with being attached to my religion and Judaism and Yiddishkeit, we are here as a tikkun nefesh, right? Like, what is tikkun? What is tikkun nefesh? To me, that's healing, right? Like, if you're not doing that, then you're not really doing it, and then you got to come back again and again to heal the pathways and the patterns that you haven't looked at yet. So, to me, it's a beautiful opportunity to say, there's nothing wrong with me. There's everything right with me because I'm actually doing what I'm meant to be doing. It's growth. How am I supposed to grow if I'm not facing that within myself? And
Yeah.
a marriage is the ultimate invitation to that. I always say marriage is the ultimate invitation to do that work because
Mm.
it's easy. It's easy to be single. You don't get an opportunity to work on the patterns that do come up in a relationship.
How do you feel about people on this journey of healing and exploration and growth that are in a lot of pain, although they've been enrolled for years and years and years in growth, and they have, like, okay, fine, with in a nice supportive conversation, they get back into, like, okay, yeah, I'm okay. But the fact that they still wake up 3, 4, 5 days of the week with a heavy heart, a lot of emotional pain, a lot of stuckness, either financially or loneliness, or still not being able to keep to a list and doing the list. Like, what do you do with, like, you've been doing this for a while, what do you do with people that really are doing the thing? They're doing the work. They're doing the thing. They go to coaches. They go to therapy. They do the retreat. They're willing. They're open. They're even a support for others, but they're so suffering still. I'm thinking specifically of two people that I know closely, and all I have is honor for their journey. They've been doing amazing, and they have won in many ways. But the amount of pain that they're facing internally, inside, it's really painful to. I'm curious how you relate this to that. It's like when the work is sort of not working.
So I really, I don't know, the minute that you asked me that question, I feel very emotional about it because I've been on a very long journey myself, and at the root of all pain lies fear, and a lot of that fear sometimes is not aware. We're not aware of necessarily what are we really afraid of. Um, Trauma takes a long time to heal. I'm not. I never ever say something that isn't true. When clients embark with me, this is not an easy journey. It's never an easy journey to embark on healing. But what's the alternative, right? Peter Levine says it very direct. He says trauma is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And so it's not that the healing is easy, but not going onto that path is it's really pointless because the suffering is just going to become greater. And for some people, it takes longer than others, right? And some journeys are more difficult than others.
Some journeys are more complex than others. There's a lot of pieces. And when there's a lot of pieces, like a lot of debt or very complicated relationships that are here, there's no way of getting rid of it in one day. It's just signing up for something longer and more complex. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the pain that I see, being very present and constant and not like it's almost like it's so stubborn, it fights you back, is anytime that
Yeah.
people really resist it. When
Mm.
somebody is really resistant to where they're at, instead of saying, this is something that I'm moving through in my life right now, and it's an opportunity for me. I hate every minute of it, but I'm not fighting it, right? Like, and even that part that I just said, like, I hate every minute of it, that in itself is the resistance. I
Mm.
don't want to be here. When we let go of that, the healing kicks in differently. It really does, because every challenge is an opportunity for something to change. Every challenge. But when we face the challenge almost as the enemy, then what are we looking to change?
What I hear is that when it hits, let's say if someone is like really, really dealing with a lot, although they've been working on themselves a lot, the doubt if it's working or not, or if they're doing good or not, is probably the hardest part than what they're dealing with. It's the resistance towards this is what it is, and what I'm
Yes,
doing is great, and this is
yes.
really difficult. And rather than like my question was like they're doing this for so long and they still wake up with a heavy heart every day or with really difficult circumstances, and the pain is really around what I'm hearing, what I'm gauging is like, and I really resonate in my own journey, like I think the pain isn't actually what they're dealing with, and with my I know in my stuff, like it's really not what I'm dealing with. It's the constant turning this rock up and down and doubting it. This doubt: is it
Mhm.
true? Is it not? Is it true? Is it not? Do they, the comparing, like someone who doesn't do this, do they have it better? And what you're inviting, what you're saying, I hear what I'm getting specifically your like an energy, like your vibe, is really, really believing that there's no doubt that and no stigma that engaging in a life of avoid of self work is 100% at a win, no matter what's happening on the outside. There's no loss in doing that. And when I'm done doubting that,
Yes.
one big chunk of shame and doubt can leave. Like there's no need for that. And then reality is what it is.
I think reality actually changes once we let go of that.
Mm.
I'll be vulnerable and share a personal struggle that I really, really struggled my whole life with, is chronic pain. And what was interesting about this is that literally, as long as I fought the pain, like I was scared of it. It's like I'm in so much pain. It was constantly there all the time. And it's like, is it going to be a bad day today? Is it going to be a good day today? I was so in battle, resistant to what it was. It was getting worse. It wasn't getting any better, right?
Mm.
Because the pain was trying to tell me something. And when I started, I introduced a specific model into the healing process, really like accepting the pain and bringing attention and loving compassion to the pain. It's fascinating to see how my body is responding to it so differently, because I stopped taking all the energy to resist what is, right? I'm not wasting all that energy. I was like, no, this is what it is. This is what my body is experiencing right now. And this is just on a physical level. I do believe that everything emotionally is also that way, especially
Right,
because I just think that physical is just a manifestation of our emotional realities, right?
right.
So it's just a manifestation for me. This is how it manifested in physical chronic pain, or I was resisting within my life. They just came out in physical pain in my body.
So the last 2 weeks, I have a couple of ridiculous pinched nerves. Like usually I have one
Mm.
at a time, and for
Yeah.
a few days, and I try to work with it either emotionally or not. Doesn't either way. And I was literally not able to move. And I'm so clear why it's there and from what it's there. The
Yeah.
other day, Basia, who you know, I think you just did a podcast with her, so she sent me this whole wording to talk to my back. It was actually really helpful. She said, "I'm okay," and I've been telling that to my back, and it's really gotten better. Plus some breath work and the clarity that I understand what it is. But I want to come back to the resistance, like the resistance I have. But in regards to talking to it, this is the sentence that I have been working with the last week: is I'm okay. I'm as healthy as anyone else my age. The reason for my pain is my subconscious mind is trying to divert my attention from my emotional pain, which is dot dot dot, which is stress, to physical pain because it is trying to protect me and prefers physical pain. As I bring these painful emotions, such as stress, into my conscious self and face them, my body will learn that I'm okay and doesn't have to protect me. And I've been saying this. I'm going to put this in the bottom of if anyone can utilize this wording. So I've been saying this and doing some breath work to really exhale and let the energy be felt. Inhale and let it be felt. Like I'm letting myself feel it instead of resist it, and then exhale just to bring lightness. Each exhale just feels nice. So to bring myself kindness and lightness, and it's been manageable. I can move. Like I was stuck, like you with the earpod. I was stuck. I couldn't move, and then I was stuck, and I felt fine. But then when I switched positions, I hurt twice as much. So the resistance thing and how it resistance creates more pain.
It's very, very true in every situation that people struggle with in marriage, you know? It's they're resisting what is in front of them and then they're fighting something. They want to change something and control something.
Mm,
Most of the time in marriage, it manifests as control, you know? I'm in so much pain because you don't want to spend time with me or I don't feel connected to you, so I'm going to start controlling things, right? It's not conscious, but that creates so much more pain, right? Because I want the problem to go away. And I'm not really, really understanding what is it that I want and need and communicating that from that place of
mm,
vulnerability, right? We're
mm,
very often creating that cycle of I am resisting what is. Like I have a client who really, really struggles with her husband not having enough time, not being able to spend the connective time that she's looking for in the relationship. But instead of really being able to tap into her vulnerable, soft side, she expresses this very harshly with anger. You're never around, and work is way more important than anything else in life. It doesn't make a difference, you know, like her aggression towards it, right? Like she's resisting what is, that work is a reality. And instead of embracing it and appreciating it with gratitude that he's working to
mm.
provide, um, and all she's accomplishing is the cycle of anger and resentment and toxicity because he doesn't want to be around that. He certainly doesn't want to be around that. And then there's huge shutdown responses from him because he doesn't know how to respond to something that feels so threatening to him, right? Like the intensity of it.
Right, approaching the reality with resistance intensifies this very same reality, and it's not about right or wrong. It's not about if he should or shouldn't be home, if he shouldn't have balance. It's about that when she approaches this with anger and with hostility, it keeps creating more of it.
Correct. And in truth is that, you know, the real reason is that she's afraid, right? She's really
Mm,
scared. She's scared of not having her needs met. And she's also scared of being vulnerable to him, right? Because she's not feeling safe within herself. When we
mm,
have fear internally, it's really hard to be vulnerable to the other person. Like, I don't want to come across as needy, or, you know, is he really going to meet me there? Is it going to be more painful when I'm vulnerable to not
mm.
have my needs met, right? A lot of times people say, well, if I take that wall down, I'm going to get even more hurt. When I'm really
Right.
putting myself out there like that, I'm like being so raw and vulnerable. And now you really hurt me even more because I didn't even have that, you know, that coating of protection.
Mm,
And that's where the self comes in so strongly, right? Like I have to learn how to hold myself in that space as well. Most of the time when somebody's able to do that, to be vulnerable and to hold themselves, their partners meet them way better. They'll be surprised
right.
because it's actually fear that keeps on causing this perpetual cycle. Like I'm not going to have my needs met. Like the subconscious fear of like no one ever meets my needs, right? Like brings me straight back into, you know, our childhood wounding, right? Like that's really where it usually stems from. our unresolved trauma patterns.
Right. So I have
So,
resistance towards what's happening, and I approach it without really wanting to go there, without willing to say what I need and let the reality be what it is, because it's scary. It's scary that I'm not going to have my needs met, and it keeps repeating the same cycle. Versus if I actually drop in and I'm like, okay, this is the reality, this is what's happening, this is what I'm feeling, and letting it be felt for a minute, then there's opportunity to do something. So a big part of this pain cycle has to do with the resistance of the reality, like my back, or these other examples that we spoke of. It's like resisting the reality of what is creates a repetitive fight, drama, with which is not the issue. It's my issue with actually sitting and being in the issue. And I see how in relationships it manifests through fights and arguments and all that, because I don't want to just sit in the moment. Like I want to be with you. I just want more time. And because just being in that is scary because of disappointment, I rather find things that he's doing wrong or she's doing wrong.
right.
So I don't have to sit in that feeling of that risk.
Just to give you an example, so because this is a really good example, at the root of this is a subconscious trauma that hasn't healed yet. Because this particular person had severe abandonment. The father figure in her life walked away from her. So that subconscious wound gets triggered all the time when her spouse isn't present and isn't available to her. That she's not really aware of that, and she hasn't really delved into healing that deep abandonment. And it gets activated every single time that he's not present or available.
Mm,
And she experiences it as abandonment that she doesn't notice, but she's really angry at him because you never show up, right?
right,
Like, you don't really care about the family. You don't care about me. All you're busy with is work, you know? But at the root of
right,
it is something much, much deeper.
right.
And
And it really has nothing to do with right and wrong in this situation. It's really
no,
about dropping in and what's really happening. I think it's really important to understand that for guys. Like when there is a something that they're approaching wrong, it doesn't mean that they are wrong, and it doesn't mean that it's about right or wrong. It's about reality. It's about, okay, what's actually present. And I know in the beginning, like of my current marriage, I remember how much it stung to be wrong, and today I'm slightly excited because I'm just getting better. It's like Matsula Asa Connecta. I really get it. I understand the value in that. But in the beginning, every single time to be like, oh, I screwed up. Like I was
yeah,
actually wrong for speaking this way. Breaking that thing is like it becomes a I'm wrong thing. And like in my core, I'm bad again. I'm bad again. I'm bad again. So I don't want to actually look at, I don't want to drop in because it's about, it becomes about I'm right or wrong. I'm good enough. I'm not good enough. And what you're talking about is like there is an underlying root in this dynamic, and it's really not about, at this point, the anger at least is not about if he should be home or shouldn't be home, if she's right or he's right. It's about what's really happening.
yeah, you said it's about reality. I'm gonna add a word. It's about subjective reality,
Mm,
because each person has their own subjective perspective of what's happening, and it's really being open to hear what my partner's subjective reality is and not resisting that because that's how they experience it. Don't be in
yeah.
fight of what your partner is experiencing
Mm,
subjectively, right? Don't
right.
do that, because again, you're wasting energy there.
Let the experience be for each, and then there is opportunities, like new
Yeah.
opportunities.
And also letting go, like I heard you say this, and it's something that I hear a lot. It's so not about being right or wrong. You can be fighting about being right or wrong, or you can focus on, do you want to be happy? You know, it's like, where's your energy going? Like, ultimately, do I want to be happy and do I want to feel closer to my spouse? Because you can be right. Your perspective can actually be right. But if your partner doesn't understand you or doesn't necessarily agree with you, is there a different way? Is there a third way? I say it's not black and white. Is there a gray color in between? So it's looking for that gray, not for the black and white.
This everything or nothing, black and white kind of mindset for me, it's a very childhood need for certainty and security. It's not my adult. My adult is totally excited for grace. I mean, and red, but my adult
Beautiful
likes
color, by
color.
the way. Looks really nice.
I think it's the last episode I'm recording here. We finalized our move for the summer. Maybe one more, but I think this is the last one of this setup. But I'll bring my reds along. Um, but yeah, this need for certainty, which means black or white, right or wrong, good and not good, and
Right.
then a grown up strength and safety lies in everything in between. It's like in the process and the unknown, and from that place to drop in and be like, okay, this is your opinion, this is your feeling, this is your experience, and maybe for just a minute that can be okay. I can just let this exist, just
Yeah.
let it be, and listen to that. Yeah, that's nice. That sounds valuable. Like it sounds like a valuable tool to just start with that. It's like I hear you, I hear where you're at. It's like just letting that be for a minute, and not having to change that or fight it or resist it. Like the resistance to reality. The reality is that I think like this and you think like this. A really good place to start. Okay, so going backwards, and tell us what you do,
Oh, all right.
and maybe
Um,
how'd you come to it?
I work with couples primarily, and I'm a very, very big believer that marriage is the unfinished business of childhood. That is, it's a slogan that I use very often because I really, truly, genuinely believe that it's an invitation to heal our wounded parts. Um, and I am fascinated by the couples that come into this work over and over again. They inspire me all the time because I see so much pain, like we started off talking about pain, right? And I see it transmuted, but it takes work, and real commitment for themselves and the relationship. And I find it incredibly inspiring and courageous. It takes courage, the courage that it took me to do all this work. Because when we do our own work, it's like we forget about the journey that we've been on sometimes. So when I see it reflected back from my clients, I'm like, thank you for reminding me the journey that I've traveled because I see it in them now, and it's such a beautiful reminder for myself, to celebrate myself, right? To honor myself, to honor the journey that I chose, rather than resisted, right? Um, so I incorporate a lot of different models into my practice because I don't necessarily believe that there's only one way to heal. There's only this way or that way. And so I incorporate both body approaches as well as mind approaches from the bottom up and from the top down, because I don't believe that people can heal only in one vacuum. For different people and different couples, there's different needs. So we adapt it based on where they're at and what they need at any given time. I always dreamt, I was a little kid and I was very, yeah, life is supposed to be full of love and incredibly idealistic. I was called an idealist. It's very painful to hear as a child that that's not reality. That's not life. Life is painful. Life is not meant to be that way. But I always had it in my heart, knowing like that's not true. I know different. In my heart, knew different. Love can prevail all, but I had to figure out what that means. Like, what does it really mean to love? I had to figure out how do I love myself before I can even figure out to be in healthy relationship with somebody else. And it's an ongoing journey. We learn to love ourselves deeper and deeper through the initiation of healing ourselves and the marriage. I think it's where the opportunity lies at the core, at the deepest, to really love yourself. Because, like you, this is not my first marriage, and I'm ready for this. And then I got married again. I'm like, no, there's more work to do, right? Like, it's
Oh my
such a
god.
beautiful place to see where there's more healing that I can find within myself.
Yeah, my resistance to being wrong is after 5 years of intense, like full-time therapy, a bunch of retreats, so many modalities, really feeling like I'm at a place where I am connected to my, and then as soon as I'm, even in the beginning, like as soon as I'm even slightly wrong, that it's all back. Like the resistance, the judgment, my ego taking over, my beliefs, my ego not Dafka taking over, my ego thinking that this is bad. That's why it's something interesting I've learned about ego in the beginning, that all I need to do is teach it something cooler and it's just going to jump for it. It's like the only reason it thinks that sorry is a bad thing is because it wasn't taught that sorry is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. And after a good couple of months, like, oh, sorry rocks. Okay, ego. Now sorry rocks. It's like a puppy. Yeah, so I resonate with that. It's like thinking I got it, and then marriage is like actually doing it, and it's like, oh, now I have to actually apply it, train my nervous system that it's actually okay. even though in my head conceptually all these concepts are okay, like, sorry is vulnerability, truth, giving the other person space. So yeah, I resonate with that a lot.
It's been fun. I say, at one point in time, you can take this journey. And like you said, people have a lot of resistance or negative association to healing. You can make it fun too. It doesn't have to be all serious. You can bring fun into the element. I think it's an important part of healing as well. And playfulness is such an important, vital part for yourself healing and a relationship, right? We forget that. We really, really forget that. When life takes over and stresses take over and you got to pay the bills, you got to raise kids, and there's just a bunch of things on your list to do. We forget to do that. I think the greatest lesson that I had in that of recent years was being in physical therapy, part of my chronic pain. And I went into this new studio, like a physio studio. And I remember being there the first time, and they were all like, it's like a big room. Everybody's being treated in the same room, same space. Such fun energy. They're all talking, there's music, and I'm like irritated because I'm in pain. It's like, guys, this is not fun. So I couldn't change anything about it, right? There's no point, like the resistance of what is. And I'm like, I'm there for 3 times a week. And so the first week, I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. And then week 2 was like, maybe I'm getting used to it. And then week 3, I'm like, you know what? Healing doesn't have to be so painful and serious. Why can't I have a laugh?
Wow.
Well, my physio is working on me and I feel like I'm going to die from pain, but I'm laughing through it. And I started laughing sometimes. He's like, wow, this is pretty good because I'm really hurting you right now. I'm like, you know what? I decided, let me have a good time while you're doing this. And it really
Right.
changed a lot in even in how this translates. It's like, bring humor into your life, bring playfulness into your marriage, and lighten things up a little bit. Yes, you're going to get into conflict. Yes, you're going to have arguments sometimes. It's not about avoiding it completely. It's about how do you address it and how do you cope with it. Sometimes humor is a good thing. I'm not talking about sarcasm. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Okay? I want to be very
Right.
specific on that. Let's not talk about sarcasm.
Or yeah,
But
deflecting sarcasm, wegmachen,
yeah,
like none
yeah,
of that.
Abwegmachen, that's right. Minimizing. Like that's not what I mean. I mean, sometimes it's good to, I think it was funny. I saw it somewhere recently. Maybe it was a video or something, this couple that argues and they have this mechanism of breaking the pattern of arguing. One of them starts realizing that they're going into their inner child and acting out. So they're like sticking out their tongue and making funny faces. And so like the minute that cue comes in, the other person's like doing the same back to them and just they can't help it. They start laughing together. It's like, okay, let's
Right.
like talk about this for real, like let's have a real
Right.
conversation about this.
Right.
Just breaking the patterns of being so uptight, or
Right.
very oftentimes repeating patterns of childhood of not non-healthy arguments or conflict that very often comes through.
In a relationship that feels not chosen, what does a couple do? I think that I hear it a lot from guys. I don't know. I don't know how it's but I hear it from Hasidish, but I don't think it's necessarily a from thing. I think it comes a point where that feels not chosen, specifically if it's a system 19-year-old show marriage, and that feeling of like I didn't choose this life or this marriage or these kids even. Where do you start with that? It's like I didn't even choose this life. Like what do you do with that?
I see that a lot, and I do see that, like you said, mostly in arranged marriages, right? And there's a difference between being set up on a date or going out, in the Hasidic world where it's very, very, it's a custom to meet somebody for half an hour because your parents chose it for you and then say Mazel Tov, right? It's like 15-year-old. I didn't do this. That's not me. That I didn't choose that. That was my parent. Um, it's a very painful place to be when couples come in from that place because I don't really want to be here. And now I'm 15 years into it. I'm stuck in it. I think the biggest
Right.
approach is really starting over because you have to get to know your spouse, really know, because most of these couples don't actually know themselves either. I want to say that that's a pattern that I see a lot. They've never really been able to get to know the depth of one another to see if we can start building real connection in that process and redating themselves and really like, I really want to take you out, right? I want to get to know you and see if that can open up a space of connectivity and love and admiration for one another, because these elements are always missing when people have prearranged marriages.
Not to say that it doesn't work, but how much of that is really true, that we're dating and exploring each other while there is a 6, 7, 8, 10 kids and a life together? Like, what kind? It's a cheat. It's not actually a choice. It's like you're proposing to get to know each other, really. But isn't the fact that they're committed just a constant tug against that?
Well, I wouldn't say that, to be truth, because even in my marriage, like our kids, we're in a different phase. I call it a different chapter in our marriage. Our kids are all grown up, so we're moving through the emptiness syndrome now. Congratulations to all people who are there. It's really painful. And what I'm discovering in this like season of our marriage is that I'm getting to know my husband again, and he's getting to know me from such a different lens. He's like, we talk to each other. I'm like, I know you forever, but I didn't even know this part about you. So we really
Mm.
take intentional time because life is busy with kids, right? And so we have different kind of energy when we're raising children versus now it's like a little bit slower for us and we have more time. Creating that dating space when you have children and really setting that time aside for yourself in the marriage to say, this is really me wanting to get to know you better. And tonight I'm going to prepare myself as if I do want to take out a person that I'm getting to know for the first time. Our energy is different. The intention behind it is different. Making the effort, like getting a bouquet of flowers and showing up at the door, showered, or like coming home and taking a shower and going back out and doing that, like literally taking the steps of like, how would I really want to take care of this person if I met them for the first time? Not pretending, like actually doing the action steps. It changes. um, it brings to mind a couple that I had a really long time ago. They were married for 15 years. They were at that threshold, and she was really a beautiful woman. I have to say that. Like physically, she was very attractive. And he said it's not that she's not attractive, and he doesn't find her attractive, but he didn't choose her. Right? It was exactly this case scenario, and I'm like, I got a bunch of kids with this woman, and I wake up sometimes and I'm like, who is this person? I never chose you. Like, how did this happen to me in my life? And it was very painful for them to sit through this, but they did it. They worked through what was behind that, because really behind that was also the trauma of feeling that I have no control. And it's not just about the marriage, it's usually also about patterns in their childhood. So it's
Mhm.
not just the marriage, it usually boils down to more than that. They didn't have a voice as children, perhaps. They didn't have choices that they made in a healthy way. I find many backgrounds that have, prearranged or controlled marriages, children don't get to make mistakes, right? They
Right.
don't get to mess up. Like, one of my mentors always says, like, if a teenager is too well behaved, we definitely have a problem. We certainly have a problem, because if he's too well behaved, that's going to come at some point, right? Like, we want teenagers to misbehave. When my kids are getting into trouble, I'm like, oh, here it comes. Congratulations, right? It's part of development, and a lot of that development is very stifled in, stringent Hasidic communities, or very like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's no, the
And
parents are scared of the mess up, so they don't really let it happen. Then the not having a choice story keeps perpetuating, like keeps repeating itself in the marriage. And what you're saying is that a
correct.
date is going to work regardless of that story. It's like lean in. It's a little bit like the other thing of resistance. It's like, okay, this is reality. It's very painful that there was no choice, at least in this experience, like in your experience, in my experience, like in this dynamic. Like some people love it. They love that they never had to date. I've heard it. Like so, but it's really painful for you or for them. And now a date is a date without the association of it, without connecting it to like I have no choice, I have no choice, I have no choice. And I mean, my understanding in Yiddishkeit is that a couple, one of the fundamental principles in Yiddishkeit about marriage is that there is a choice all the time, every day. It's like a new breath, like Moidani every morning. It's another choice every morning. And the whole notion that there isn't is a stigma, like many other parts of Yiddishkeit. It's just fear of what other people will think. But the truth is that there is a choice. if they did date or didn't date. It's engraved and embedded in marriage, is that there is a choice.
Absolutely. And we just went back all the way to the beginning of our conversation because it's the fear that parents have, right, that causes this pain, right?
Mm,
Pain is always the result of fear. And at
mm,
the root of it is their own stuff, like that they're projecting, right? Like they're trying to control it. I'm so afraid, so I'm trying to control, so on and so forth. And so they're hurting their children in the process rather than allowing what is, right? If a child is going through a phase of whatever it may be, right, getting into trouble, being a teenager, exploring, it's actually part of what's meant to be, right? They're resisting what is.
right, right,
So
right,
it's another cycle
right,
of that happening.
right.
Um, and then, fortunately, the price that we pay is working it through in our adult life in the marriage, right? We get to do that work and we get to heal our pain from not having had a voice, choice, and whatever else is beneath there, and taking a look at how that projected trauma was handed down to us from our parents, right? But we have to face that because our parents were probably even more traumatized than we were. I would definitely say that, right? That they lived in a completely different world and reality, where children are supposed to be seen and not heard, right? I heard that many times as a child. So,
Wow.
yeah, so imagine what their world was like if they believed that growing up, right? I don't even know if children were meant to be seen, right? Like,
Right.
but we know now that children who
So
aren't heard,
talking about stuck and not having a choice. There's a root to that. That's a you're like there's a strong root to that, and then it manifests through, oh, I didn't have a choice. And the truth is, in
correct?
marriage, I do have a choice. I can date. I can actually
Yes.
pretend that we're doing, and it works if I actually distinguish the two. I move away the belief of I don't have a choice. I don't have a voice. My liking doesn't matter, and I actually go on the date.
And you may not like something that you experience on the date, right?
That was my next question. What happens if the guy or the girl goes out? They're like, you know what? I'm not attracted to this person. I don't like how they look, and I'm not particularly into their whatever.
Usually there's something deeper when there's lack of attraction when somebody is already married. There's always something deeper. It's really not a one answer. It's really challenging, that one, because attraction is very important, right? But it's not everything, because sometimes we can be really attracted to somebody, but the relationship isn't healthy, or there's a lot of unhealthy patterns or toxic patterns. So that's a big one. And that's part of the reason why, we know, especially from the Torah tells us that you have to see who you're marrying and you have to be attracted to them. You can't be forced to marry somebody who you won't feel attracted to.
So
Um,
what happens in that phase? We're talking about a married couple that are working, and now they're giving each other quality time. They're getting to know each other, and then one of them says, "I'm not attracted to the other, to my partner. I'm like, I don't find them attractive."
yeah.
Maybe there's a lot of build up to it. There have been 15 years of comparing and looking at other people and thinking that they're so spectacular and whatever. Maybe there's build up to it. Probably there is. But in the moment, what's your next step with that? What would you tell them? What would you suggest besides book a session?
Yeah, because the question in and of itself is already a big telltale that there is something much deeper at the root, right? Because if everything is okay, then it's almost impossible that you're absolutely not attracted to your spouse at all, right? It's almost not possible. Because if your hearts are connected and if you are really in an intimate emotional relationship, you know, physicality plays a role, but it can't play that big of a role. So there's always a bigger telltale sign when somebody says, I'm completely unattracted to them, right? I don't know what their relationship with themselves is to start with, right? That's the first thing. And I also don't know their preconceived notions of how someone is supposed to look, right, for them,
Right, and why?
you know,
Like if they
and
think that
why.
this look is what's appealing to them, why? What do you think someone who looks like that thinks will give you?
I spoke to somebody recently because it's very, sorry about that for cutting you off. It's very relevant to this point. I spoke to somebody recently who is in the dating parsha. It was very interesting. It's like, I'm really into blondes, and I'm like, okay, no problem. I hear you. Um, and I was really curious about that, like really, really curious. What is that really? And blonde is the opposite of what their mother looks like, and they have a
Mm,
real difficult relationship with their mother. So they find brunettes, really unattractive, and It could be the most beautiful brunette out there, right? It didn't make a difference. But it was just like the trigger that it brought up in them. Like, as long as it doesn't look
Mm.
anything like my mother, which I really have a hard time relating with and being in safe connection with, then I already like it, right? It was like a fascinating thing. So when you say that to me, I think that there is much more that meets the eye
Yeah.
than just saying, I'm not attracted to my spouse.
So the next thing is, this is not necessarily for in the dynamic of 15 years in working on marriage. This could also be earlier, younger, even dating, like people that have been dating for months and they really don't know what the next step is. So what happens next is like, okay, so I'm not attracted, but then I do some work and I am attracted. But there is this constant struggle with it because there is a trigger, there is a story, and it takes years to unlearn that. How do you approach a next step? Like, how do you support? What's your vision for them? Like, is it okay to get into a marriage or a relationship even though they're in their head, they're dealing with it like, I'm attracted, I'm not attracted, I'm attracted, I'm not attracted.
It could be. And it's a little dangerous because if they're really struggling with it prior to committing to the relationship, it could be a little bit of a red flag later on. Yes.
And if everything else checks off, which is why I'm thinking of someone specific, everything else checks off. It's what he's chosen, and part of his well-being chose this girl. That's
Yes.
probably why he's not so attracted to her. His well-being, like his dysfunction, would pick someone else, which is very enticing but dysfunctional, and his well-being really chose her. But so like, yeah, so it could be, and but everything else checks off, like understanding, support, patience, and respect, and really really well open communication. But the attraction keeps going, sits by the low, has a little spike. And I've heard this so many times in the self-help seeker community. It's like sometimes the functional, it's like it sits here and then there's a little spike and then it's back here and a little spike and then back here. And this little spike is what I'm like sort of leaning into. Like, is it okay to marry or to commit? Or it's a big commitment. Like, I know there's a choice every day after, but knowing that beforehand, is it okay to say no to that? They have the awareness. I think it's more common than not, though. Like, that's the crazy thing. It's very specific to a specific person, specific case of this couple that I'm thinking of, but I think it's more common than not. It's like, should I like her more? Should I be more attracted? Can I go with this and commit and propose and and I think it happens on the other way too. It's like, I definitely know my wife's journey with me, and what she thought she likes and what she likes, and all that. It's like, can I actually commit? And even though currently it's the attraction goes like here and then back.
So I don't have a good answer for that because I don't know this individual's past. And I think that there is something there as you're sharing it with me, just by what you're saying, there's a fluctuation that goes up and down. And I'm wondering if that's in general a little bit of his pattern, that he moves through life that way. He goes in and out of things like that. Like he's into something, he's not, he's into something, he's not. Sounds a little bit of an inconsistent maybe pattern in his life. I don't know if that's true. But attraction, I think, has also to do a little bit about where we are within ourselves energetically. When we are in a very good space and we feel differently and revitalized and energized within ourselves, we also exude that energy outward. So it definitely comes across to our partner and we see things from a different lens, but we're not always there. So I do think it goes up and down a little bit. But I
Mm.
can't tell you about this particular
Yeah,
individual
yeah.
because I can feel that you're feeling into his energy, and I don't know if it's true that he has inconsistencies about himself.
That's a really good place to go with like, if we're generalizing, it's a really good place to go. It's like, where else does it show up? Like, what's my relationship with myself in regards to my attractions? Does it change every day? Like, yeah, I'm in well-being. Am I consistently in well-being? Or what happens when I am
Yeah,
consistently in
yeah.
commitment to my well side?
How we do one thing is how we do everything, right? And so when you spoke about this particular situation, what it feels like is that there is a connection to other things in his life. That's something to look at. I say that everything on the outside is a reflection of our inner world, and it's always something to be invited to look at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do know from knowing people, friends, myself, that these things actually can get better and better. Like a consistent relation with myself. It's like if I actually commit, let's say, to self work, then I actually spend less time doubting the whole thing, like doubting myself. Like there's a certain piece of doubt that actually goes away with practice. And
Yeah.
I think with attraction, the same thing can happen. If there are spikes and I'm actually committed to something, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay like that forever. And generally, things that are forever, there's an avoidance that's forever. Like it's
Mhm.
met with an
Agreed.
equal amount of avoidance forever.
Agreed.
Like, otherwise, everything changes in this world. Nothing stays the same. So
Nothing ever stays the same. We don't
unless
want it to stay the
unless I
same.
keep an avoidance this strong, then
It
that
doesn't stay
keeps
the same either. It actually
that
gets worse.
gets worse. That's yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
It's
nothing
true.
stays the
It's
same,
right.
and
It's
we
true.
don't want anything to stay the same. It either gets better or it gets worse. But
Right.
resistance and avoidance usually creates a pattern of, you know, a downward cycle, I
Yes,
would say.
yes, yes. That makes sense. To end this amazing conversation, and what are 5 myths about a good marriage that people think?
Hmm. Love is easy. It's not, right? It's really hard to learn to love ourselves, but it comes with work. And a good marriage doesn't take work, which is an absolute biggest load of nonsense I've ever heard, right? It's a Hollywood figment of imagination. I think it does us a tremendous disservice. The youth today is so conditioned by it that it's frightening. You know, they think that one small thing is wrong and I'm out, you know, and
Mm,
it's really not. It's everything good takes work, right? You know, a good married couples who are happily married never argue. It's actually completely inaccurate, you know. So my grandmother Oliver Shalom used to say that a couple that never argues is chaval for the money that they spend on the rent. They must be two idiots. I mean, two complete idiots that have no sense of self. Where there's no, what do you mean? Like, it's okay to argue. It's okay to have disagreements, and it's just a matter of learning to find safety in how we argue and how we come out of an argument, or if it's worse than an argument, how we repair that rupture between these two people. It's not about we never argue. That's pure avoidance, like two people who absolutely are not facing anything in their life,
yeah, that's
right?
when there's no argument. Okay.
Yeah. There's also no connection, I think, most of the time. But I can't say
Right.
it's across the board, but it very oftentimes mimics that.
I think in a good marriage there is doubt, like it creeps in. Maybe they don't talk about it all the time, but individually, I think partners really doubt the marriage, even though they're in a really good relationship, and it's common.
That's true.
And
Yeah,
it's
it's
not.
true.
It's like the podcast that didn't work out that no one really starts with. It's like, oh,
Right.
here's where I failed. It's like, yeah, doubt is a thing, and maybe even not being attracted sometimes can also live in the harmony of a good marriage, and then it spikes up. It's exciting again.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Very good point, actually. I like that.
Thank you.
No, very good point, because I didn't think of it as a myth. In other words, people probably think that a good marriage never has doubtful times, and that's actually very inaccurate. Every good marriage goes through fluctuations of, like, oh, you know, whatever it is that the person is moving through at the time, but
Yeah,
it doesn't it's not the telltale sign of, like, that marriage won't work. You know, that's not the telltale sign. There are telltale signs, but we won't talk about that right now. There are telltale signs of when marriages don't have capacity to kind of survive. We won't get into that right now, but that was a very good point that you
I
said.
really want to get into that, but okay.
We got to do another podcast for that because we're running
Yeah,
out of time.
yeah. We're done. Okay, so if you can share, I guess, 2 or 3 points about healing trauma as a general, I guess misconceptions. I think I've dropped a lot of devil's advocate about it, like assumptions and resistance and fear. So if you can maybe share in this way, like 2 or 3 misconceptions about healing trauma, about healing altogether.
I'll tell you what the biggest word that comes to my mind is, and it's what it isn't. It's not going to a Tony Robbins event. It's a lot of people think, like, okay, I'm going to do that and I'm going to work on my mindset and everything is going to work out perfectly fine. And trauma is not like that. Trauma lives in our body and it lives in our tissues, literally in the cellular tissue of our inner selves. And I don't believe that we can talk our way out of it. I think it's really important that people who embark on this journey don't limit themselves, don't just go to a talk therapist or to a coach to talk about things. It's not going to get you where you want to be, and you're doing yourself a disservice. Today we have such beautiful, beautiful gifts. I say Hashem literally blessed this generation with so much out there to find ways to heal, and it always incorporates a piece of the body. So whether it's somatic work, whether it's EMDR, IFS are really powerful ways of healing. Some people do well with psychedelics if that's the journey that they want to explore, again, in safety. I think it's right now being a little bit taken out of context of what's safe and what's the purpose for it. And it can also become very unhealthy. So we're not going to touch too much on that part.
To really explore the wide range of what it means to approach and growth and healing, and understand that there's so much available to not limit it.
Yes. There's
Got
so
it.
much accessible. We live in a time where even, sometimes I hear people say, I really can't afford, to go to do anything, right?
Right.
Go to therapists, whatever it may be. There's so much available online. You have free resources. There's so much that you can buy, books, even somatic books. Learn how to work on your own nervous system, how to regulate your nervous system, how to really notice things within yourself. Breath work is such a powerful, powerful way of healing yourself. For those who can afford having facilitation, there's so many skilled people out there who can help and can be of service, and to really let go of this attachment to there's something wrong with me, the stigma of
Right.
mental health is really important. You don't have this feeling of like when you go to a doctor, you're not hiding it from your friend, right? Like I have a doctor's appointment, you're not telling them where you're going. Like, yeah, I'm going to my eye doctor. I need to check, my prescription went up. Like we're not going to hide talking about that,
Yeah.
and just not having shame around it.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing. The misconception about healing is that there's shame, and it's shameful
Yeah.
to be in this position. And it's so much more. It's such access to soul and to light and to Hashem and to all these ancient teaching of wisdom and real kindness. It's like that's the access. That's the access to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really really
Thank you.
appreciate it. This is went very different than last time.
It was really,
Appreciate
really a
it.
pleasure. Like you said, this has turned out completely different, but this is the beautiful part about going with the flow. And I think whatever was today in the present is exactly what it was meant to be, you know? And
Right.
we'll still figure out what the other part was that wasn't meant to be. Still
Right.
more to say with, but why
Yeah.
not, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much
much.
for
Thank
being
you.
flexible and following up and accepting of the of my scratching the other one and for doing it again. I really really appreciate it. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.